Welcome to the Stride podcast. Today, my guest is Bernadette Jiwa. How's life, Bernadette?
Oh, life is good, Lee. Thanks for inviting me to chat to you.
Hey, no problem. You are the first guest on the Stride podcast. I mean, this is a real honor for me. I'm a real fanboy, so thank you very much for coming on.
You're very welcome.
Let's start at the beginning because chronologically thinking is the best way for me. What part of the world did you stumble into, Bernadette? And what was the mood like as you grew up in that environment? And how might that have marked you as you grew up?
Well, Lee, I was born in Dublin, which is the storytelling capital of the world. And I was born into a house with no books, but it didn't mean that there weren't any stories there. And the reason I say that is because both my parents were from families of 11 kids. So just compute that for a second. And so tons of people around in our stratosphere. And we lived as a nuclear family with my grandmother and my uncle in a 2-up, 2-down house. So there was my parents, 3 kids, and my grandmother and my uncle all squashed into one little house. So it was a beautiful place and area to grow up in because there was a real sense of community. Lots of kids out in the street. We were always out in the street. We were never in the house. And so much freedom. When I think about the freedom we had back then, and what I see today with kids not being able to go out in the street or not wanting to because they're inside with their video games and what have you, I think, we were really blessed.
Yeah, I think we must be around around the same age because all I remember is my mum actually kicking me out and not letting me back in until it was tea time,
That's it. We used to go out and they wouldn't know, obviously no phones. They wouldn't have a clue where we were, whose house we were at. There were fields. There was a housing estate. It was like a council housing estate in Ireland. They're called corporation estates. And you were in somebody's garden, which wasn't a garden. It was literally a patch of mud. Or you were out in the street kicking a ball or a can or over at the convent grounds, trying to get the blackberries off the blackberry bushes. It sounds like ye olden days, but it was a really, there wasn't a lot of money, but there was certainly a lot of community, and I love that. I feel lucky to have grown up there.
Hey, it's taken us longer and longer to scroll down to the 70s whenever we have to put our age in electronically.
Yeah, well, I'm in the 60s, pal. So.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize. You look good, Bernadette. I'll give you that. I'll give you credit for that.
Oh, okay.
So you grew up in Dublin, wonderful kind of family life. What age, is there a time period as you was growing up where you noticed the world? Where, for me, for example, I didn't really notice the world until I moved to Wales when I was 10. And I was kind of like thrust into a brand new environment and a new world with, people I didn't know. And I found it really difficult to fit in because people were different and everything all of a sudden was accentuated. Whereas before it was just life, it's like I wasn't even thinking about it. Was there a time period when that happened to you?
I think I noticed the world just growing up in that environment. I didn't really know a world outside of it, apart from the fact that my aunts and uncles all migrated to the UK for work, which meant they came back and they were exotic. So when they came back in their sharp suits, or my auntie, we didn't have cucumbers in our house. That wasn't something we ate. But my aunt from England would come and say, want cucumber sandwiches. And that was sort of exotic. So if you're talking about noticing the world and noticing the differences between people, sure, that was that part of it. But I was a real noticer from a very early age because I was surrounded by adults, I think, being the eldest in the family. So you can imagine me with these 4 adults and the dynamics of parents and a grandmother and an uncle all living in the same house and watching adults interact. So there was that, I think. So that was my world. That was the world I was noticing.
And if I ask you to think back to your childhood and to think about your bedroom, what's the first memory that comes up? What age are you? Describe what your bedroom looks like.
Oh wow! Well, we all slept in one bedroom. So there was my parents, the double bed at one side, and a little, like what we'd call a Moses basket, which my little sister was in, or a cot then eventually. And my brother and I were at the in bunk beds next to the window. I was on the bottom. I don't know why I was on the bottom. I was the oldest. I should have had the top bunk,
Yeah.
but he was on the top bunk. And yeah, he was a rascal. He used to jump off the bed, and so we were all in that room. And then my grandmother slept in the next bedroom, and my uncle, who was about 6'4", had this tiny little box room that was like a box. So we were all pretty crammed in tight there. That's what I remember.
Well,
I'd be about 5, I think.
it was the same for me when I grew up in Reddish Stockport. We lived on a council estate, and I shared a bedroom with my sisters two sisters for a long period of time, because we always had an uncle living in the spare bedroom. There was always an uncle in the spare bedroom, and I always remember those times as being, I have warm memories for those. But again, like when I moved to Wales, things changed. I lived in an old mining town, Bernadette, and a lot of the miners had been made redundant. And I don't know if that helped because they had a bit of money, but everybody seemed to be walking around with the best clobber on. And I always remember my mum going to get me trainers, and I wanted Nike, and she got me Gola, and I was crying because the kids were going to bully me. And it sounds like, for me, when you say that everybody squeezed into one bedroom, immediately I think to myself, oh, perhaps they didn't have a lot of money. How did money influence you when you were children? What were your thoughts around money and finance, and how did that affect you?
Oh, my parents never had any money. I mean, it was week to week for the brown envelope. That's how they lived. My uncle, who lived with us, he couldn't work because he had health problems. So there was always that. And yeah, it was a real working class existence. But, we didn't know any different because everybody on the street was in a similar position. Although my best friend from school, who I was very envious of, her dad was a painter and decorator, and they had a telephone in their house. And that was mega because he had his own business. If you had a telephone, you were the thing. You'd made it. Money.
Yeah. So what was your schooling like then, Bernadette?
Well, school, the interesting thing about Ireland is it's a terrific public education system in Ireland, and school was the making of me. It didn't matter if you didn't have the resources to send your kids to school. All kids got the same education. All kids had the same opportunity. And Lee, I remember my first day at school because, as I said to you, we didn't have any books in our house. And I remember walking into this room where there was a sand pit and those sticky blocks you could stick together and make towers of. Those maths for math skills, and books and color and paint. And I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. And I remember this girl and that was the day after my 4th birthday. As soon as she could get rid of me out of the house, my mother sent me to school to keep me occupied. And I remember this girl who, it was also her first day. There were 2 of us starting that day, crying at the door. She was much taller than me, had her hair done in 2 pigtails, and she was just howling. And I just was standing there incredulous with I think a little spade in my hand, thinking, what is wrong with you? How could you not want to come here? Everything is here, that a kid could desire. So I loved school from a very young age.
I got 2 kids. I've got Zia, she's going to be 3 at the end of the month now, and I've got Jude, 18. And obviously they have different challenges. And I always thought that when Jude got around, the 18 mark, that things would be a lot easier. And I wouldn't have to like be a dad, and I found actually that Jude in his teenage years is actually more challenging than a 2-year-old. What was your teenage years like when you were growing up? Because they are some of the most tumultuous years of our lives, because we're going through so many changes. What were yours like?
I was a pretty sensible teenager, apart from, loving boys. I always got on really well with boys. So being friends with boys and that being sort of risky in, growing up, people seeing that as risky. So your parents worrying about you back in those days in a Catholic country like Ireland, worrying about what you were going to do with boys or what boys might do to you. But, it wasn't, it was very grounded. I was pretty sensible. I have to say, I was pretty sensible as a teenager. But I know what you mean about parenting. You're never done, Lee. I'm telling you now, you're never done.
I know. So what were some of the challenges you had growing up as a child? You've given off the impression that you loved your childhood and it was really great. Can you think of any moments where you found it really difficult?
I'm struggling to think of anything as a challenge, more as something that's an opportunity to overcome something. I mean, my bigger challenges, I think, came later. Maybe we could.
Let's talk about those then. So, rather than move on to something else, what were some of those challenges as you got older?
Well, the biggest challenge that I ever had to overcome was losing my brother at a very young age. That really hit me hard. He was 31 at the time, and I had 3 kids at the time, under 6. And that just came out of nowhere. We were 17 months apart, born 17 months apart. And even though he had got a chronic kidney condition, he'd had a kidney transplant, and it seemed like life was going to go well for him. Him and his wife had another child after he had a transplant. And then suddenly he got this lymphoma. And went downhill pretty quickly, and he died within probably about 6 months of his diagnosis. And that was the biggest thing I've ever had to overcome in my life, because I don't, well, obviously something I couldn't control, but other things that I see as challenges in my life, I see them as opportunities to sort of go around them and create your own path. But that one, you never get over that, Lee.
Yeah, it's like whenever although it's within us, like as a human being, to kind of move on, we're never prepared for those type of things, are we? And it affects us all in very different ways. What was you doing at that time, work-wise and stuff?
I was a stay-at-home mom. I made a decision when my children were before my kids were born, that I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. So I took that time out to be with them, and it's the best decision I've ever made. I would never go back on that. If I had my time again, I would do that again. In fact, most decisions I've made, I would do them again. I've been pretty lucky.
When you said you're a stay-at-home mum, was there a plan? Was you saying to yourself, okay, I'm going to be a stay-at-home mum until this period when they can go to school, and then I'm going to focus on achieving my goals in this area? Or was you just, I'm going to be a stay-at-home mom until forever? What were your thoughts around that?
My plan was to do the best I could by the kids, really, and then see what happened around them as they got older. And that's how it played out, really. I know you know me first and foremost through the work that I do and through my writing. I didn't start writing till I was in my 40s.
Wow.
so they were well up and running. So I could see that, as you say, I needed to carve out, if I wasn't going to also drive them insane by being a helicopter parent, I needed to, get back it, put my creative energy into something else that wasn't just them.
My stay-at-home mum role models around me are not the greatest. So my mum did the same thing, and to this day, I saw her kind of give away all her power and and she had no independence. Even now, she's just 100. She's like completely, reliant on my dad. And then here now with Liza's parents in Los Angeles, same thing. He goes to work every day, 7 days a week. He's in his 70s, 12, 13 hours a day. Comes home and she's pottering out, making him dinner and stuff. And even now with Zia, Liza's takes the bulk of the parenting. Yet I know she has her own dreams and her own aspirations, and she has had to sacrifice so much in order to be a mum, but she gained so much being a mum as well. Was it difficult for you at that period, or did you just fall straight into love with it? I mean, what was it like in terms of particularly the support and the interaction with your husband during that time?
It was a choice, Lee. It was 100% what I wanted to do. And I married a great guy who really supported me in that. I often hear stories of couples who have his money and her money, and my husband knows my strengths and he trusts me implicitly. So things like the money, I look after that stuff. And it was 100% what I wanted to do. It was never, oh, this is just something I'm doing marking time because I have to. My kids were everything, and they are everything to me. They're the thing I'm most proud of.
So you
teach me something every day. Those kids.
Yeah, they are the greatest teachers, aren't they? Mine's teaching me how to be calm as anything when she pees and poos on the floor right now. That's my mind. That's my mindfulness training, Bernadette.
Wow, Lee, you're right in the thick of it.
I am in the thick of it. So you get in your 40s, and then you start writing. You write 8 books. So was there any time period when you were worried that I don't know, this is weird because you absolutely love what you're doing, but was there a time period where you're thinking to yourself, I'm not going to achieve other goals in my life, other than being a great and wonderful parent?
No, never. Because I think I wasn't ignoring the creative side of myself when I was bringing the kids up. I was doing other things that were creative, whether that was organizing great birthday parties for them or whatever I was helping them with. I wasn't ignoring that side of myself. And I didn't need a grand plan other than that. Not very strategic, eh?
So what is it about parenting that the benefits of parenting or the rewards of parenting that you see yourself using in your day-to-day life today in your business?
I think it's unconditional love, truly. And, being able to see other people and to understand that they have got their hopes and dreams, and helping them to achieve that. That's what I have done for my kids, and that's what I think I still help people to do, and help people to see the best in themselves.
I was 35 when I stopped drinking alcohol, and it was at that time that I say that I opened my eyes and I began my new life, so to speak. And that sounds like a cliche, but that's the best way to describe it, I guess. And then back then, I did some work with the Jack Canfield Success Principles training, like a life coach thing, Bernadette. And I had this coach called Michelle, and she started to talk to me about values, and I had no idea what she was on about. She was asking me what my values were, and I had no idea, and I could Google it, to find out, but it was something that was absolutely alien to me. Talk a little bit about values and how they have affected your life from an early age growing up, if you would.
Well, I wouldn't have known to call them values either, Lee, if I'd met Michelle. They values are something that I think are intrinsic to you, and even though you don't know to articulate them as that, if you sit with yourself for a bit, and understand how you act and show up in the world, then you realize what your values are. So I think the big one is family, because family has always been that thing that's been very present in my life, and love and creativity. They're three values of mine that have always been constant.
Has there been times in your life where you've been living out of alignment with your values?
No, I don't think so. In fact, I think they've guided me to very good decisions. Very good decisions.
It's really interesting because I'm a member of the Right Company, which is your little community. And I've just circled family, love, and creativity. And that's exactly what we're all about at the Right Company, and a lot more. Are you aware of that?
Well, that's what it seems to feel like. And you know what? That's just great for me to know, because there are so many online communities. As you know, you've got one, and you have the same feeling in your community. And when I created the Right Company, when I launched that with Mark about 18 months ago, I didn't put love, family, community, or creativity down there, but as objectives. What we were talking about doing was helping people to find like-hearted people who could support them on their journey to doing work they were proud of. And it just so happens that when you show up as you manifest those values. It's the same with you in your Strive community. You can't build it any other way, because that's who you are.
Yeah, I've kind of realized over time that my values have typically changed. I mean, for a long period in my life, Bernadette, I was living outside of my values, or I was certainly putting the wrong values, at the top of my hierarchy, so to speak. And when I encounter people now who are struggling in life, one of the first things I do is actually try to do a little bit of communication around this area to see if people are really thinking about these things. Because I find that, by actually looking at the words, like family and love and creativity and adventure, you can start to kind of like take a step back, go, oh, wow, this is life. But it sounds like you've always been very with it. Is with it the right word? Mindful?
I think I'm really intuitive. I don't know where I get that from, Lee, but it's certainly, listening to my heart is a big thing for me. And so whether you call that mindful or with it, I don't know, but I'm very aware of what I feel is a difference between right and wrong. And I always make a decision based on, is this the right thing to do?
I think when I think about everybody that comes to Strive, almost to a man and a woman, you can trace back a lot of the problems to childhood. And it sounds like you had a loving, it sounds like the values of family, love, and creativity were all kind of thereabouts when you was growing up, and that helped produce his foundation to what became, a wonderful human being and a wonderful career as you were older. And what advice would you give to somebody who didn't have that upbringing and in the middle of life have got themselves a little bit stuck and are perhaps drinking too much or smoking or, not really, or I guess the worst one, Bernadette, is the housewife, the stereotypical housewife who is stuck at home with the kids and doesn't seem to be able to bust out of, they love their kids, but they want so much more from life. I know I'm asking you a huge question here, but what advice could you give to them?
Well, are they stuck, Lee, or are they making a choice? Because what we have to think about is having no regrets. When I think about my brother, I often think, wow, what would he have done if he had known at 21 that he had only 10 years left? Or what wouldn't he have done?
Yeah.
And so why shouldn't we live every day like that, with that feeling that this is what I want to be doing today? Instead of, when I was at home with my kids, I never wanted to have that feeling like I couldn't wait for them to be grown up and gone. Sounds idealistic, I know. We all have the ability to make those choices, and that's what character is, isn't it? It's the choices we make.
I did that earlier on, actually. Liza took Zia out for a walk, the afternoon walk, so she could sleep, and she come back in, and I kind of cheered silently. I was like, yes, she's asleep. And that sounds really horrible to say that. It's almost like, oh, great, we can get on and do these other things now, which of course means, if you're thinking like that you're not 100% present with your child, right?
Well, Lee, I'm not saying I didn't have days when I wanted them to go to sleep so I could have a break. I'm not a saint. My kids will tell a funny story where, mom used to wind the clock forward an hour so that she could get us into bed an hour earlier because she was so exhausted. You're allowed to be human. You're not perfect. You're allowed to be human. You're allowed to need time for yourself too.
I mean, you work with a lot of people who are stuck in the world of business, at the right company, for example. People will be, wanting to solve certain problems, improve their stories and stuff. And very often what's stopping a lot of people is the inability to make a choice or kind of fear. So, like, can you talk about some of the things, some of the ways that you coach people to kind of get over the hump? Some people are stuck in the dip. Some people are facing Stephen Pressfield's resistance. You encounter this on a daily basis. I encounter it on a daily basis. What's your method of coaching around that?
Well, Lee, you've been exposed to it, so you tell me what happens. Come on,
Well, here's I mean, this is what I think. You don't like to give people the answers. I do. That's interesting, but that just come up in my head. You don't like to give people the answers. You don't waste paper. You don't waste wordage or lines. You don't waste breath. You're very succinct, and you ask very thought-provoking questions to enable the person who's asked you for help to find their own way to the next stage, knowing that you were there to hold their hand should they not quite be able to get up that next step. Does that sound about right?
That sounds about right, Lee. I think you should do a transcript of that and put that on my website. You're spot on. You're spot on. How I work with people is I try to see them, and I try to see the thing in them that they don't see in themselves, because it's impossible for us to see what other people see in us a lot of the time. And then I try to give them a great question that's going to help them to see what I see, which is how amazing they are, or how they are going to change something for someone else, or what story they have to tell, or what really is at the heart of their story, and the brilliant work they're going to do that they're going to be proud of.
And you are full of empathy and love, and with family being one of your central values that really kind of like screams out of you. But I've noticed you've also got the ability to kick ass, and you don't suffer fools gladly. Probably that's a wrong statement. Let me think here. If you think someone can, if you think someone's fanning around, you're not shy at telling them. Are you aware of that in yourself, and where do you think that comes from, and your thoughts on that in terms of a coaching style?
Oh, I would say, Lee, I'm not a very good coach. Michael Bungay Stainer would not agree with some of, I don't label myself as a coach, firstly. I consult with people, and certainly in the right company, I don't want to be showing up as a coach, more as somebody who's helping you to get to spots and yourself come to your own to reflect and come to your own conclusions alongside the other people in there who are reflecting with you. Yeah, I am aware that I can be impatient. I do get impatient for people to create the change that they want to see in themselves and the world, and that probably comes from this backstory with my brother, because I think every day is precious. And we have everything we need mostly to do the thing we want to do, but the fear is definitely a thing. I understand it.
And we've all got this inner monologue going on in our head. Most strivers, when they get triggered and they have a craving and they drink, normally when we're kind of dissecting the process that led up to the drink, there's always a comment around this inner monologue that drove them there. Stephen Pressfield calls it the resistance. Bell from Thinking About Drinking calls it Wolfie. Stella at Strive calls it Chucky. I like the resistance one. What are some of the things that go on in your head, Bernadette? What's your inner voice always chirping on about?
It's the same as everybody else's. Am I good enough? Am I smart enough? It's all about being enough. And imposter syndrome, we all have it. Anybody who says they don't has to be kidding themselves. Because if you are striving to do something, you are always a little bit out of your comfort zone.
Now, this is like a theme at the moment at Strive. And actually my next training course is going to be based loosely around Brené Brown's Daring Greatly, where she actually talks about not enoughness being kind of like a result of our what she believes we're living in a scarcity culture. So I've got people working with me who have this kind of I'm not good enough, or I'm not enough, and that's leading them to drink. How do you keep that not enoughness in balance in order for you to continue to be a success?
I think I go back to this value of creativity, because when I'm not creating, I can get very grumpy. So that's the price I have to pay. I have to keep putting stuff out there. Otherwise, I'm not going to be living my best life. So if I don't get over that, then I'm not going to be able to make the impact I want to make. I'm not going to be able to touch the people I care about touching. And I'm not going to be able to fulfill my own needs and desires to create things.
Is that a Dublin-born work ethic?
You mean the creativity thing?
No, the first of all, you've got the awareness, obviously, that creativity is your outlet, or your let's call not enoughness the villain. So we know creativity is almost like one of the heroes, like most powerful weapons, but actually getting that weapon out and going to war is like work. I mean, when you described your early background, I started thinking to myself, wow, this is a person who can work. And you put out 8 books. To me, again, I'm like, this person can work. How do you have a strong work ethic, and how important do you think work ethic is alongside things like creativity and innovation and those kind of things?
Well, if you don't have a strong work ethic, you can be as creative as you like, but you're not going to get anything out the door. Even if it's an apple pie, you've got to get to the point where you actually put the thing in the oven and get it out there. So I do have a strong work ethic. My parents are, both very hardworking and have been all their lives. My dad it just turned 80 and he still wants to be working and doing things and climbing ladders and things he can't do. Well, no, I better scratch that in case he's into this. Things he can't do as well as he could when he was 60.
Yeah.
It's always been a thing that you go to work and you do the work and you work hard for whatever it is you want. And maybe that thing that you want isn't only money. Maybe that thing you want is something else, and it's going to take work.
Is that work ethic ever been detrimental to you, or have you always been able to maintain the right sense of balance? Is there a balance? What are your thoughts on balance, actually?
What are my thoughts on balance? I don't really think about it like that, Lee, because maybe it's because I work from home and I don't, I don't have to sacrifice some things for the sake of others. I can create my own balance. Maybe it's just something that it's always been present for me.
And how did you ever go to work, or did you just literally, you decided that you was going to take care of the kids? I tried to put these dots together for me, all these jigsaw pieces in. So you're at home with the kids, you're loving it. This is what you want to do. Totally understand that and see that. I saw it in my first wife. I see it now with Liza, absolutely loving and adoring that role. At what point then do you start to do what you're doing today? Where's the missing jigsaw piece here? For me, for example, I stopped drinking alcohol, and I remember being in the kitchen after stopping, and I said to my father-in-law, there are so many people out here that are dying because of this, and I know how to stop. From this moment on, I'm going to try and save as many lives as I can. I remember that moment. Did you ever have an epiphany, or was it just a gradual thing?
That's a lovely moment, Lee. You should write about that.
What I won't write about, though, is we then created the name of the Needy Helper, because I said, well, people are going to type in Google, I need help. That was my SEO skill back then.
It's all right. It doesn't matter. It's your intention. You still got up and started something.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to avoid your answer. I'm trying to acknowledge I'm not trying to avoid your question. I'm trying to acknowledge you first.
I appreciate that.
You've done, I think what you're doing here is incredible. It's incredibly generous. And another thing, going back to Ireland for a second before I answer your question, is that alcoholism and alcohol as an escape was and I feel like still is a big part of the culture there. And we've talked about before how culture, or how people end up with certain habits because of the culture, because of wanting to fit in. So I just applaud you. You inspire me every day.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So we can blame Australia for me writing my 8 books. Well, if you think about, let's go back to my brother dying in 2000, and after that, getting over that, the grief of that, and still raising my kids, and then I guess not consciously thinking about what was next, but somehow putting that out to the universe, and this opportunity to move to Australia with my husband's work that came up. We'd never had a conversation about migrating. We lived in the UK at the time, had done for our whole married life. And this opportunity came to go to Australia, and my husband took our 13-year-old, jumped on a plane, went to Perth for his interview, called me and said, I've got the job. And by the time he landed back in the UK, I'd sold the house.
Oh, wow.
It was ridiculous. We had just finished renovating this house that we'd been in for 10 years. And, you know, that was the choice. We were on our way to have this adventure. And then there's something truly special about Australia. It's a place where boundaries don't seem to exist as far as I can see. It's a place where you can be creative and free and try things in a way that I think in the UK I would never have thought to do.
Right.
And I started a business coaching practice. That's where I started. I started coaching people on their business stories. The woman who waxed my legs was having trouble with her business strategy, and I could see lots of ways she could improve her business, and started helping her with that. And one by one, I got clients in that way, and I picked up a book called Purple Cow, which I think you will know.
Yeah.
And it changed my life. I just thought it was, so Seth Godin became a real mentor to me, and I thought, you know, I'd never written anything in my life. I'm going to start a blog. If this is how you crystallize your ideas, this is how you think, and this is how you can share your message with people, then I'm going to start doing this thing. And so I started the blog.
It's incredible because your blog is like, I've been thinking to myself about email lists and stuff, and you know, how can I get more people to, you know, my major weakness is always, how can I get more people to Strive when I should just be focusing on providing value for the people in Strive, which I am doing a much more now. If they were all on it, they'd tell you that we're doing that right now. However, like, I was thinking about this email, and I was thinking, does anyone read email? And I was thinking to myself, what do I read? And the only blogs I ever read are yours, Seth's, and Tim Urban's at Wait But Why, and Tim's are really long, you know? And you wouldn't believe how many of your blogs and Seth's I turn into blogs on alcoholism, and I embed in my training on alcoholism and getting over it, and living and trying to find and live a fulfilling life. Does that surprise you, or are you like, oh yeah, I can see that? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Does it surprise me that the lessons are universal?
I guess, yeah.
No, not at all, because it's all stuff that's just happening in the real world around me. Whether it's the builders next door and like I posted about today, and how it was their character that attracted me to asking them for their business card. And because they're demolishing the house next door to us right now, but they're just such great guys. And I'm thinking, they're the kind of builders I would need sometime in the future. I'm going to grab their card, not because I have no clue what their plastering is like, but they're good people.
Yeah.
So those are universal messages. They're not just business messages.
You mentioned there, you had no real plan to go to Australia, but you said something about putting it out there to the universe. What is your thoughts around meaning and purpose? Like, are you the type of person that thinks we're all here and we've all got a specific purpose and we've got to find what that is? What's your view on meaning and purpose?
You know, it's a tricky one, because I think people can also use that to hide. I don't know what my purpose is. So I think part of your purpose is to be open to what opportunities that come your way and to deciding whether to take those or not. That's one thing. I do have a purpose, and I think, again, my brother dying really helped me to crystallize that, even though I probably didn't articulate it at the time. But, he died with a lot of dreams still left in him. He wasn't a kid who was great at school. And because of that, he had teachers who just wrote him off, who taught him to believe that because he wasn't good at school, he couldn't be good at life.
Yeah.
And that was not okay. So he died with a lot of dreams left in him. And so I feel like it's my purpose to help people to do work they're proud of and to not die with their dreams left inside them.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. It's almost like his passing was a real catalyst in your life. And I'm doing your story skills workshop at the moment, and catalyst is one of the 5 C's, and it takes me back to where I am today, Bernadette. And I think every addiction that I've quit, and I've quit a lot, there was always a catalyst there. Smoking was my son, gambling was my marriage, alcohol was my marriage, drugs was my career. How important do you think it's important for knowing that happened to you and knowing that it happened to me? Is there something there that people who are kind of getting stuck around this, that maybe they can we create a catalyst, or have we just got to hope that the universe chucks one our way?
I think we can rationalize our catalysts with hindsight, Lee. Anything that happened to you could have gotten you to that point of giving up, but it was maybe something that helped you to see yourself in a different light, in a different role, as a different character in your life. I'm not an expert in addiction. I'm not saying I am, but I am a believer in hope. And I am a believer in agency. And I am a believer in what you're trying to help people to do.
Do you know what, Bernadette? Just absorbing your words and thinking about my own question, it's really interesting that we're both, for whatever our journeys were, we both arrived at this call on this night together talking about life. And I think we've arrived here for very, very different kind of ways, in as much as I've looked at my catalysts. My catalysts are all born out of fear. You seem to be more hope and more, I want to do this. And I think if I don't sort myself out thinking about this, it could be an impediment to me. So what I'm talking about is, when I gave up alcohol, I'm giving up alcohol because I don't want to lose my marriage, not because I want a great marriage. Do you see what I mean? For me, it seems like the wrong way of thinking, and I could certainly see how that's kind of spread its evil tentacles through my life.
That is just a brilliant way. I never thought of it like that. It's like going towards something or going away from something, and then also giving yourself labels. I always think of myself as extremely lucky, even in a bad situation. And I'm trying to think of some, but even in that situation, with losing my brother, I always think that I would think, well, I'm lucky to be here for my kids, because he had 2 daughters who he didn't get to see grow up.
Right.
So yeah, I guess it's about framing. It's how you frame it.
Framing is really important. I think the other word that's come into mind here is mindset. So on the have you read Carol Dweck's book, Mindset?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think you've very definitely got a growth mindset, and I very definitely have a fixed mindset. And when I say that, I mean from a foundational starting point. So if me and you were androids, I think your motherboard would have been one from the growth mindset shelf, and mine would have been fixed. However, and that has given me a lot of challenges in my life. And you can tell by my line of questioning to you, right? My line of questioning to you is coming from a fixed mindset. However, as I'm getting older and getting more mature, and I'm hanging around people like you, that motherboard I'm slowly rewiring it so it's becoming a growth mindset. And then I guess awareness is key. Like, so I wasn't even thinking about these things when I was 35, Bernadette. Like, what's your view? So how can we get people to be more self-aware? I've just finished. Well, I'm in the middle of doing it. Do you know Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People?
Yeah, I do.
So I just put a job out there, freelance, to a poker company to do the 7 Habits of Highly Effective Poker Players. And my pitch worked. They went for it. So I asked the top 50 poker players in the world I asked for 3 habits. And the one that come out as the top was self-awareness. To develop a real keen sense of self-awareness, be honest about your capabilities, where you are in the world, whether or not you're in poker, like, whether or not you're winning because of luck or you're winning because of skill. How do you think we can cultivate and help people raise more awareness and be more self-aware?
You asked the way you asked that question first was, how can we make people? Yeah.
Yeah.
And, talking to your Strive community, or thinking about who's going to be listening to this, I don't think we can make people do anything. If you're in Strive right now, you're there, not there because Lee made you get there or sign up or join. You're there because you want to be there. So what's the reason you want to be there? And what are you going to do with that?
Yeah, I think that's well put. I'm always trying to fix people, Bernadette. I'm always trying to fix people, and sometimes empathy doesn't come naturally to me. I had to work very hard at being empathetic,
Well, if you weren't empathetic on some level, why are you trying to fix people?
I know.
Wouldn't it be a lot easier to just go about your life and say, I'm sorted now. I've sorted my addictions. Good for me.
Yeah, I get your point. Totally get your point. You mentioned there that Seth Godin is an important mentor in your life. Who else stands out as an important mentor in your life?
My uncle, who lived with us that time when I was a kid, he wasn't around for my whole life. I think he died before I had my first son. So he's been gone about 30 years. But boy, was he a wonderful mentor to me. I mentioned that we didn't have any books in our house. He was the person who got me into reading. He took me up to the library by the hand. He got me a library card and gave me this love of reading. He was the person who taught me how to play chess. He was the person who taught me how to be curious. When he went for his hospital appointments, he brought me there and we'd sit in the cafe and he'd tell me what the different belts on the nurses' uniforms meant in terms of their seniority, and told me, oh, you could be a nurse one day, you could be that one day. Because bear in mind, I didn't have any role models who were not just people who worked in factories or cleaned offices or were barmen in pubs. That was where I grew up. I didn't know anybody who'd been to university when I was a kid. So he was very much a mentor to me in helping me to see that there were possibilities outside of what I knew.
I'm going to give you a triple barrel question relating to that. How important are mentors in our life? Should we actively seek them, and how should we do that?
Okay, well, as you can hear, I think mentors are really important because I have had people in my life who've completely changed it, whether that was with a book or a conversation. And as far as actively seeking them out, Lee, they're there all around us. I don't believe we need to actively seek them out. We just need to be aware that the opportunity to have mentorship from somebody, whether that's through a book or a podcast or listening to someone's journey like your journey, is there for us if we choose to take it.
Do you think though that, I mean, first thing that comes up for me is don't be afraid to ask somebody for help and guidance. I think that could be like a stumbling block for some people. So just reaching out and sending you an email and going, "Hi Bernadette, can you help me out in this a little bit?" But so that's something that comes to mind. But then another thing I is cultivating a relationship as well. Like, so I don't know. Like, I don't know how you met Seth, but I'm obviously, I call Seth a mentor as well because I've read so many of his books and I've taken so many of his courses, all of his Akimbo courses. But if I just reach out to Seth and say, "Hey, Seth, do you want to help me out?" He's like going to be, "No, I'm too busy." How do you feel then about you saying in yourself, your head, I really, really want to I really see some value in building a relationship with this person. Do you feel that that's manipulative, or does it have to be organic? I'm not giving you a really good question here, but I'm sure you get a feel of what I'm getting at.
I get a feel of what you're getting at, and I'm cycling back in my mind. You know, that's not how I go about it at all. I go the opposite way, and the opposite way is how can I help that person? What am I seeing that might be helpful to them? That's maybe sounds a bit. Maybe that sounds a bit arrogant, but that's not how I mean it to be. It's about generosity. So I had a young friend once who moved cities, and she didn't have any friends. And she was very upset about it, and she said she was lonely. And what we came to the conclusion through the conversation around this was, I said to her, you know how you get good friends? You become a good friend. You be a good friend, and then you'll get good friends. So I think there's also an opportunity for us to mentor, to be a good influence on somebody in our lives, and to step up and to help, which is what you're doing.
I think that is really, really good advice. And again, I think that comes from a real growth mindset. The way that I see that manifest in Strive for myself is loyalty for me. So like, if somebody is on Strive and they're sticking around on Strive and they're there on every call and they're posting every day, I'm going to do everything for that person, you know? Like, loyalty is their generosity to me. So if you're listening, Strivers, that's the key to my heart.
It's truly though, you know, people can't help but give back to people who give to them. That's influence 101, isn't it? Robert Cialdini. Reciprocity.
Well, I'll give you a good example.
And not from a manipulative stance, but from this is who I am. I am that person. This is who you are, Lee. You are that person who values loyalty. So you want to cultivate that.
I have had that actually. I can never say it. Reciprocity. Say it.
Reciprocity. It's a hard word to say.
Yeah. There was this online poker company. I was a bit of a rogue freelance poker writer, Bernadette. I was one of the only person one of the only people in the world who would just say what I wanted to say about any company, because I had never had ties with anybody. And then this company started to send me gifts, and started to invite me to events. And I knew straight away what they were doing. You know, it was a very bizarre situation. I was like, I'm being manipulated here, but do I want to turn down this free ticket to the Bahamas? Like, it's a real weird spot. Look, we're coming up on the hour. Really appreciate your time, Bernadette. Really love talking to you and getting to know you a lot more. Pretty sure the Stripe community would learn a great deal from your story, and that's the whole purpose here. But just before you go, how does being Bernadette Jiwa make you feel?
That's a really odd question, because I don't know how to be any other than I am. I've been this person for my whole life, even when my surname wasn't Jiwa. You know, lucky to be here and to have the opportunities I have, and the family I have, and the chance to speak to you who are across the other side of the world. You know, when I think about my grandmothers and what limited opportunities they had in their lives, I can't help but think how lucky I am.
Gratitude, huh? Bang out those gratitude journals. Bernadette, thanks a lot for being the first ever guest on the Strike podcast. We'll look back on this in 10, 20 years and let's hope it stands the test of time.
Oh, I'm sure it will, Lee. Listen, you are amazing. I am so in awe of the work you're doing.
And ditto to you too, Bernadette. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lee.